And now we turn to inflection. In this short lecture, we will define inflection as a morphological process, introduce some common inflectional categories, and demonstrate how inflection works in English and some other languages. Consider the following sentences. Jane has a cat, and Jane has cats. What changes have we made to the form of the word cat? We added "s" to it, thus indicating that Jane has more than one cat. The "s" at the end of a noun marks that the noun is plural. In other words, that it refers to more than one entity that can be counted. We did not alter the essential meaning of the word cat. We just signaled that there are more than one. Now, Jane's cats are cute. Now we're adding an "s," pronounced as "z," Jane's, to the noun Jane. And in writing, we're placing an apostrophe between the noun and the suffix "z." But now we're certainly not talking about multiple Janes, like we were talking about multiple cats. We're signaling that Jane is the owner of the cats. This "z" is a possessive suffix. Again, the meaning of the noun Jane is not changed. We're only showing that something belongs to her. Let's look at similar changes in verbs. We'll begin with the sentence, "We work on weekends." The subject pronoun "we" refers to more than one person. It is plural. The verb indicates present tense, a regular present occurrence. What will happen if we change the subject to a singular noun? In this case, the name Axel. Just consider me a great fan of Axl Rose, if you will. If the subject is a singular noun, the verb in the present tense also seems to add "s," but it does not indicate plurality like it does with nouns. On the contrary, it signals that only one person works. It is a marker of singularity. Let's shift the time frame to the past now. Axel worked yesterday. The verb now does not have an "s" at the end. It has a suffix written as "ed" and pronounced as "ste," worked. This suffix is a marker of past tense. This suffix is a marker of past tense. Keep in mind that it applies only to verbs. Tense is a verbal category. It does not apply to nouns, at least not in Indo-European languages that English is part of. There is no such thing as a past tense noun, only a past tense verb. Finally, let's move back to the present. Axel is not working today. Notice that this present is different from Axel works on weekends. The "s" there indicates a regular repeated occurrence. The ing on working in the current sentence indicates that an action is happening, or in this case not happening, at the moment of speech. The suffix "ing" indicates an action in progress. Just like with the nouns, we did not fundamentally change the meaning of the verb work. The changes we made concerned whether the action was present or past, whether it was done by one person or more than one, and whether it was regular or ongoing. These are grammatical functions. The suffixes that we added to the words to mark grammatical functions and contrasts are called inflectional suffixes, or simply inflections. And the process of changing the word form to reflect those grammatical functions is also called inflection. Inflection in English is accomplished exclusively through suffixes and morphological alternation. Unlike many other Indo-European languages, English has only 8 inflectional morphemes to mark 8 grammatical functions. 2 of these functions are marked on nouns. We use the suffix "s" to mark plurality, and another suffix "s" used with an apostrophe in writing to mark possession, which is formally called the genitive case. Verbal inflections reflect 4 grammatical relationships. In the present tense, the verb takes on the suffix "s" if the subject is singular and third person, that is, he, she, or it. The past tense is marked with the suffix "ed" or a vowel alternation in the verb's root. Progressive participles, the ones indicating an action in the middle of its development, are marked with the suffix ing. Perfective participles are marked with the suffixes en or ed. Adjectives and adverbs can both be inflected to show the superlative and comparative degrees. The comparative degrees indicated by the suffix er added to the adjective or the adverb, or the word more before the said adjective or adverb. Faster, smarter, more agile. The superlative degree, fastest, smartest, the most agile, is marked by the suffix est or the word most. Affixation is the most common way of inflecting English nouns, verbs, and adjectives. But another way to show inflectional relationship is alternation. We often refer to such inflections as irregular, although they are grounded in the regular patterns in the historical development of English. Nouns like mouse or goose have irregular plurals, mice and geese. There are about 200 irregular verbs in English, but they happen to be the most common ones. For example, the past tense of eat is not eated, but ate, and the past tense of go is not goed, but went. These are all examples of morphological alternation. Adjectives and adverbs are mostly regular, but the words like good and bad have irregular comparative forms: better, best, worse, and worst. While English has just 8 inflectional categories and 8 inflections to reflect them, in other languages there exist other categories. Number is a common one across languages. Most common inflections exist for singular and plural nouns. In some languages like Spanish, German, French, or Russian, for example, adjectives are also inflected for number to agree with the noun they describe. Case is something that largely died out in modern English or Spanish, but we retain it in pronouns, where we distinguish between subject forms, object forms, and possessive or genitive forms. Pronouns are not considered inflections, though. But in languages like German, Russian, Polish, Hungarian, or Turkish, case inflections mark the role of the noun in a sentence, and these can be quite elaborate. Gender is another grammatical category. We no longer have it in modern English, but if you speak Spanish, French, or German, you are surely familiar with feminine nouns like la mesa and masculine nouns like el libro. In German, the neuter gender also exists. Der Tisch is a table, it's masculine. Die Mauer, wall, is feminine, and das Fenster, window, is neutral. Strictly speaking, we should probably not refer to these categories as genders, but rather as noun classes, because in many other languages there is no connection between actual genders or sexes of the living beings and the grammatical genders. In Navajo, for example, the nouns are categorized as animate and inanimate, but there is no masculine, feminine, or neuter division. In Swahili, there are 9 noun classes altogether, divided by whether the nouns refer to people, animals, manufactured products, and so on. There is no connection to masculinity or femininity. But the term grammatical gender is an old tradition dating back to when Latin was the base for linguistic analysis several centuries ago, and it is very slow to change. Verbal inflectional categories include person and number inflection. Spanish is a good example of it. Person refers to the subject of the verb. First person is the speaker, second person is an addressee, and the third person is, well, a third party, he, she, it, or they. Number refers to whether the subject of the verb is one or many. In Spanish, for example, the suffix o is added to the verb whose subject is I, and the suffixes as or es if the subject is the singular you. Peninsula Spanish also has an inflection for an informal plural you, as in you guys, such as coméis or habláis, while many Central and South American Spanishes only have the formal plural you, such as hablan or comen. Tense is another common category for verbs. Tense refers to the time the action of the verb happens or happened with respect to now. Germanic languages like English have inflections for past and present. Other languages like Spanish, French, Occitan, and Portuguese have future tense inflections as well. Aspect is another temporal category, but instead of marking whether the action is present, past, or future, it marks the action as ongoing, completed, or prior to something else. The ing suffix, ing, marks ongoing actions in English, and the en suffix marks prior or completed actions. In addition to the inflectional categories that do or did exist in English, like gender or case, for example, some languages have other categories not found in English. Definiteness, whether the speakers are talking about a general entity or some specific one, can be marked morphologically. This is the case in Danish, which adds a suffix where English uses a definite article. Voice is a grammatical category that may be marked on verbs. Turkish, for example, adds an affix to mark a verb for active, like to read, and passive, like to be read. Animacy was already mentioned as a salient grammatical category in Navajo. This is also true in Slavic languages, where animate and inanimate nouns may have different patterns of declension. To recap, inflection is a variation in the form of a word to mark this word's function in a sentence. Inflections do not change the word's fundamental meanings or their parts of speech. Instead, inflections mark grammatical categories and contrasts, such as tense, person, number, grammatical gender, and so on. This completes our discussion of morphology.